इंद्रियाणि संयम्य
य आस्ते मनसा स्मरन्
ये आस्ते मनसा स्मरन्
इन्द्रियार्थान् विमूढात्मा
इन्द्रियार्थान् विमूढात्मा
मिथ्याचारः स उच्यते
मिथ्याचारः स उच्यते।
कर्मेन्द्रियाणि संयम्य
कर्मेन्द्रियाणि संयम्य
य आस्ते मनसा स्मरन्
ये आस्ते मनसा स्मरन्
इन्द्रियार्थान् विमूढात्मा
इन्द्रियार्थान् विमूढात्मा
मिथ्याचारः स उच्यते.
मिथ्याचारः स उच्यते।
Someone else would like to recite?
कर्मेन्द्रियाणि संयम्य
कर्मेन्द्रियाणि संयम्य
य आस्ते मनसा स्मरन्
य आस्ते मनसा स्मरन्
इन्द्रियार्थान् विमूढात्मा
इन्द्रियार्थान् विमूढात्मा
मिथ्याचारः स उच्यते।
मिथ्याचारः स उच्यते.
कर्मेन्द्रियाणि संयम्य
कर्मेन्द्रियाणि संयम्य
या आस्ते मनसा स्मरन्
य आस्ते मनसा स्मरन्
इन्द्रियार्थान् विमूढात्मा
इन्द्रियार्थान् विमूढात्मा
मिथ्याचारः स उच्यते।
मिथ्याचारः स उच्यते.
कर्मेन्द्रियाणि संयम्य
कर्मेन्द्रियाणि संयम्य
य आस्ते मनसा स्मरन्
य आस्ते मनसा स्मरन्
इन्द्रियार्थान् विमूढात्मा
इन्द्रियार्थान् विमूढात्मा
मिथ्याचारः स उच्यते।
मिथ्याचारः स उच्यते.
कर्मेन्द्रियाणि संयम्य
कर्मेन्द्रियाणि संयम्य
य आस्ते मनसा स्मरन्
य आस्ते मनसा स्मरन्
इन्द्रियार्थान् विमूढात्मा
इन्द्रियार्थान् विमूढात्मा
मिथ्याचारः स उच्यते।
मिथ्याचारः स उच्यते. Anyone else? Okay, so let's recite the synonyms. Karmendriyani,
कर्मेन्द्रियाणि
the five working sense organs. Samyamya,
संयम्य
controlling. Yaha, anyone who. Aste, remains.
remains
Manasa,
manasa
by the mind.
by the mind.
Smaran,
Smaran
thinking of.
thinking of
Indriyarthan,
Indriyarthan
sense objects.
Sense objects.
Vimudha,
Mudha,
foolish.
foolish.
Atma,
Atma,
soul.
soul.
Mithyacharah,
Mityacharah,
pretender. Saha,
Chaha
he.
he
Uchyate,
Uchyate
is called.
is called.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. One who restrains the senses of action but whose mind dwells on the sense objects certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender. Purport. There are many pretenders who refuse to work in Krishna consciousness but make a show of meditation while actually dwelling within the mind upon sense enjoyment. Such pretenders may also speak on dry philosophy in order to bluff sophisticated followers. But according to this verse, these are the greatest cheaters. For sense enjoyment, one can act in any capacity of the social order. But if one follows the rules and regulations of his particular status, he can make gradual progress in purifying his existence. But he who makes a show of being a yogi while actually searching for the objects of sense gratification must be called the greatest cheater. Even though he sometimes speaks of philosophy, his knowledge has no value because the effects of such a sinful man's knowledge are taken away by the illusory energy of the Lord. Such a pretender's mind is always impure, and therefore his show of yogic meditation has no value whatsoever. नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशकारिणे. I'll read the translation one more time. One who restrains the senses of action but whose mind dwells on the sense objects certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender. So we are discussing the third chapter of the Gita, and the third chapter actually grows from one of the questions asked by Arjuna. So the name of this chapter itself is Karma Yoga, and it is quite clear that Krishna is going to speak about Karma Yoga in this chapter. So let's quickly understand why suddenly Krishna is talking about being a pretender. So this section of the third chapter is basically talking about where Krishna is trying to tell Arjuna how Jnana Yoga is higher, but actually for Arjuna, Karma Yoga is better than Jnana Yoga. That's how Krishna is trying to put things here for Arjuna. So we'll see how Krishna puts it. So this chapter starts with a question that Arjuna had asked. If you remember, that was right in the first verse of the third chapter. Jayasi cheta karmanaste mata buddhir janardana tat kim karmani ghore mam niyojayasi keshava. Arjuna says that, if you consider intelligence to be better than fruitive work, then why are you asking me to engage in this ghastly warfare? Ghore ma. This word ghora is a very strong word that Arjuna is using. And actually, this Acharya explained that, why Arjuna is using this word is, Krishna himself had used a similar word. I believe that was 2.49. If I'm not wrong, where Krishna had said, Duren hi avaram karma buddhi yoga dhananjaya. Keep all abominable activities far away, O Arjuna, by using your intelligence. Buddhi yoga. Buddhi yoga. I think Prabhuji had discussed that how buddhi yoga is, what does it mean and how Prabhupada uses this word. And this was a wonderful session that was given by Srinivas Acharya Prabhu. So buddhi yoga is actually a compound word. It can mean buddhi that enables us to do yoga. Yoga is to connect with the Supreme. But at the same time, it can also mean yoga that gives us buddhi. Buddhi is, ultimately intelligence is, how to connect with Krishna, and that's how it will, Krishna will start taking the discussion towards how to attain Krishna. But the thing is, so Krishna had said, Duren hi avaram karma. Avaram karma is abominable activities. So Arjuna had heard that word, and then he is asking that if you consider buddhi to be higher than fruitive activities, then why are you asking me to engage in this ghastly warfare? According to Arjuna, avaram karma is fighting the war. So any idea what Krishna was referring to when he spoke that word? Avaram karma, Duren hi avaram karma. Anyone has any idea? All right, we'll discuss it later if no. So further, Arjuna actually says, Vyamishrena Vyakyena Buddhi Mohaya Shivane. He says actually, Krishna, Vyamishrena Vakyena. No, Mishra Vakya. You are speaking equivocal instructions, mixed statements. Can everyone go on mute, please? I'm hearing some echo. So Mishra Vakya, you are giving me mixed statements. And by your equivocal instructions, by your equivocal statements, my buddhi has further gone into moha. Moha hi shiva me. So actually, if you remember, when Arjuna had surrendered to Krishna, right in the second chapter in 2.11, I believe, where Arjuna had said, now I have surrendered unto you. You are my guru and I am your disciple. I am your surrendered disciple. So at that time, Arjuna had said that, I don't know what is dharma. Dharma sammudha chetaha. Sammudha is, it comes from the root word moha. Moha means illusion. So I'm illusioned about moha. I'm illusioned about what is my dharma, what is my activity, what is my duty that I should do. So there Arjuna had said, and that therefore he had actually surrendered to Krishna. And now he is saying that actually by hearing your equivocal instruction, I have gone further into moha. So is it that Krishna wants to put Arjuna into moha? How is it? How does Arjuna goes further into moha? Any quick comments about it?
Because he's confused.
Yeah, definitely. So, and he is confused because actually, if you see, multiple times Krishna had talked about Shanti towards the concluding section of the second chapter. Most prominently he had talked about Shanti in 2.66. Ashantasya kutha sukham. One who is ashanta, one who is not peaceful, there is no question about any happiness. And then again 2.70 and 2.71, Krishna had used the word Shanti, Shanti, sa Shanti madigachati. So this word Shanti comes repeatedly. And what Arjuna is doing is, he's confusing Shanti to be external Shanti. Krishna is talking about internal Shanti. Krishna is talking about that if you live in harmony with God and in harmony with God's instruction, in harmony with spiritual culture, then you will have internal Shanti. That's how Krishna had meant it. But Arjuna is actually considering Shanti at the practical level. That, at the practical level, if I fight, there will be Ashanti. Therefore, I should not fight. So that is what is confusing Arjuna. So actually, if you see, thinking about two levels. If I fight the war, or I should I not fight the war? According to him, fighting is sinful, and not fighting is, he's saying if he doesn't fight, then he has to renounce the word. So that, according to Arjuna, is Jnana Yoga. What is that? Bhakshyasi apiha loke. I will live in this word by begging. I just renounce this word. So he is thinking that fighting is sinful, and not fighting is giving up the word, which is Jnana Yoga. So these are the two levels that Arjuna had understood. But actually, if you see, Krishna had spoken many intricate levels in the second chapter. More prominently, Krishna speaks about 4 levels. The first level Krishna speaks about is, he talks about vikarma. What is vikarma? Vikarma is sinful activity, sinful action. Then he speaks about karma kand. Then he speaks about karma yoga, and then finally Jnana Yoga. So Krishna had spoken about these 4 levels. But Arjuna has, artificially conflated. Conflated means that he has mixed up these 4 levels into 2. So that's how Arjuna is thinking about it. And that's where his confusion is. So what are the 4 levels that Krishna had said? 2.33 he talks about. So even according to Arjuna, fighting is sinful, but according to Krishna, not fighting is sinful. This 4th level, the bottommost level, which is vikarma, even there is a confusion. So the confusion is, Arjuna thinks that fighting is sinful, and Krishna is very clear. Tataha swadharman kirtim cha hitva papam avapshyasi. If you give up your duty of fighting, Arjuna, then you will definitely incur sin. Very clearly Krishna put it. He is very articulate in putting it to Arjuna. He doesn't speak in mixed language. Very clearly he said, if you don't fight, you will definitely incur sin. That's in 2.33 he had said. So one level is vikarma. 2.37 he talks about karma kand. Hatova prapshyasi swargam jitva va mokshase mahim. He says, actually, if you fight, you will attain swargam. Hitova prapshyasi swargam. And if you lose, if you die in this battlefield, you will attain swargam, prapshyasi swargam, and jitva va bhokshase mahim. If you win, you will become the king of this world. You will enjoy this flourishing kingdom. So that is the 3rd level that Krishna had said, which is karma kand. Then 2.38 he speaks about karma yoga. So karma yoga comes actually repeatedly in second chapter, like sukha dukhe samay kritva labha labho jaya jayo tata yuddhasva yujjasya naivam papam avepshyasi. And then 2.47 also Krishna had spoken about karma kand. Karmandyavadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phal heturbhut ma te sangostva karmani. So all these levels are discussed by Krishna. But Arjuna had actually only caught 2 levels. So that's where his confusion is. So he's not sure what to do. And then he's asking that question to Krishna. And from there, Krishna picks up the question, and then he starts speaking. Shri Bhagwan Vacha Lokesmin Dvividha Nishtha Pura Prokta Maya Nagha. Jnana Yogena Sankhyanam Karma Yogena Yoginam. So very clearly, Jnana Yogena Sankhyanam Karma Yogena Yoginam. So both the Jnana Yoga and Karma Yoga are coming. So it's very clear that Krishna is now comparing Jnana Yoga and Karma Yoga. So in the second chapter, the Sankhya comes in the first section of the second chapter, which is the verses 2.11 onwards. 2.11 to 2.39 is Sankhya analysis. Krishna analyzes, but here he is. So I think Prabhuji also mentioned, Srinivasacharya Prabhu in his class, that there are three words that are interchangeably used for jnana. So there is karma sannyas, jnana, and sankhya. These three words are interchangeably used. All three words mean the same thing actually, if you look at it in the context of the Gita. And this will again come in the 18th chapter. Again, Arjuna will ask a question towards the beginning of the 18th chapter: what is better? Giving up activity itself or giving up the fruits of activity? Karma sannyas or just giving up the phala. So Krishna actually, he says that, I've already told you that there are two levels of people, jnana yogis and the karma yogis. And then Krishna starts elaborating on it. So he takes a discussion deeper. So he says, na karmanam arambhan nashkarmyam purushoshnate na cha sannyasana siddhim samadhi gacchati. He says, it's a very important verse actually, the fourth verse of the third chapter. Krishna says actually, just by giving up activity, you will not become a sannyasi. There is this famous and confusing Mayavadi statement, which many of you would have heard. That is, danda grahana matrena naro narayan bhavet. Just by taking up danda is, that sannyasis have their danda, right? Just by taking up danda, just by taking the sannyas order, naro narayan bhavet. A man becomes Narayan. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had to face this multiple times. Even in Vrindavan, there were people, and Mahaprabhu had taken sannyas. People would come and, you are Narayan, because you are a sannyasi. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in his signature, he would smash this philosophy. He says that, actually, Jiva is always Chitta Kana. Chitta is basically consciousness, and he is Kana. He can never become Narayan. He cannot. So you cannot equate yourself with Narayan actually. So Krishna is very clearly saying that just by giving up activity, you do not become sannyasi. And just by taking sannyas, siddhim samadhi gacchati. Just that you have taken sannyas doesn't mean that you will attain perfection. Because these are just externals. Externals are not unimportant, but they are not all important also. What matters is internal. What is there in my heart? What is so what matters actually is how pure I am, whether I am engaging internally truly in the service of that. Service attitude should be there, that devotion, that surrender, that purity. All these things actually matter. So externals do matter, but they are not all important. They are not unimportant, but they are also not all important. So, and then Krishna gives a very important principle that why it is so. He says, nahi kaschit kshanam api jatu tishthati akarmakrit karyate hi avashah karma sarvah prakriti jair gune. Everyone is forced to act helplessly due to the, because of the material modes of nature. And Prabhupada actually takes this discussion higher in his purport. He says, very important statement Prabhupada makes. He says, actually, it is not a matter of, what is that Prabhupada writes in his purport? The first statement of that verse, he says, it is not a question of embodied life, but it is a nature of the soul to be active. It's, the Mayavadi idea is that, just because right now we are conditioned, that's why we're active. When we become unconditioned, when this conditioning is removed, then we'll go back and merge into Brahman, and then there will be no activity. Prabhupada smashes it. He says, actually, no, the soul is always active. So it is the nature of the soul to be active. Sat Chitananda, so forget about material level. Even at the spiritual level, there is activity. And there is much more activity actually. So it is like, in the school, sometimes we used to have those races, right? And then we also used to have that sack race. Anyone has heard about sack race? Anyone has seen that? What is the sack race?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh
so
yeah, we sit in the sack and jump step by step.
Right. So we are in a sack, and then there's a race. Everybody is in a sack, all the kids, and then they jump towards the finish line. So this body is like a sack on the soul. The soul is very active, but they are bound by the body. The soul wants to run around so much, but even with that sack, the sack of this body, we run so much, here and there for our material desires. So this activity is there at the spiritual level also. It's not that, when you become spiritually elevated, there will be no activity. No, Prabhupada says it very clearly that you cannot even Krishna says that you cannot even maintain your body, if you are inactive. And it's very practical also. You will have to do something at least, right? You can't just be inactive, and you at least to maintain your body, you'll have to do some activity. Even eating is an activity. So you can't say that, because I have taken sannyas, now I have become inactive. That is actually foolishness, that if you think that, I have now become inactive. So that's a very important principle that Krishna gives. And then comes this verse 3.6, which we are discussing. Karmendriyani samyamya yaste manasa smaran indriyarthan vimudhatma mithyachara sa uchyate. So this is like some people call it the grahastha section of the Gita. This verse and the next verse we'll discuss why. So here Krishna is saying karma indriyani samyamya, one who restrains the senses, uh, the senses of action, but whose mind dwells on the sense object, certainly deludes himself. Mithyachara sa uchyate. Mithyachara means he's a pretender renunciate. So why a pretender? Because the world thinks that he is a renounced person. He's such a pure soul, but internally he is contemplating on the sense objects. He's just thinking, how do I attain this? How do I attain that? And secretly he might be even working on it also. Nobody knows about it. So he is a mithyachari. He is a pretender renunciate. And why vimudhatma? Vimudhatma means he is foolish. Vimudhatma means vimudhatma because he is fooling himself also. Because he's just taking sannyas, but he's doing all sorts of nonsense activities. So Prabhupada writes that this is a very sinful kind of a person, that he's cheating himself and he's cheating the people also. Prabhupada had famously said also that cheaters are attracted to cheaters. Sometimes these people get a lot of following also, and then after some time people realize that this person was cheater when there's some scandal that happens. There's so many such babajis, gurujis in India nowadays who are in jail. For so many years they had done all kinds of nonsense activities, including murder, rape, and whatnot. So then their followers realize that we were following a pretender renunciate, a cheater. So so what happens is, you can make as much spiritual progress as the person who you are following. You cannot make more than that. So basically, wherever that person is going, if he's a sinful person, you are following him, you'll also go to the same place where he has gone. So it is very important to, before you start following someone, before you start taking instruction from someone, before you start taking inspiration from someone, we have to see how his life is, what his activities are, and whether they are in accordance with Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. So also there are some feel good instructions that some people give, and they have huge fan following because that is what people want to hear. And you don't have to do anything. Just, what is that? Tato yato mat tathopat. There are many different opinions and everyone has their own path. So you just don't have to bother about so much thing. Yato mat tathopat. Just do whatever you want, and that is also, ultimately you will reach Krishna only. All paths lead to Krishna. And that is Prabhupada smashes that philosophy. If all paths lead to Krishna, then why does Krishna has to speak the Bhagavad Gita? Because the purpose of Bhagavad Gita is Krishna wants Arjuna to attain himself. He says, if you do like this, then you will certainly attain me. Very clearly, manmana bhav mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mam evashyasi satyam te prati jane priyosi me. You will definitely come to me. And then that is the purpose of speaking the Gita. If all the paths would lead to Krishna, this is one of the discussion that Prabhupada has with one of the persons on an airport, I believe. So he had asked Prabhupada, I have heard that in the Gita, Krishna says that all paths lead to Krishna. So then Prabhupada looked at him and said, if that is the case, then why does Krishna has to speak the Gita? Because the whole purpose of Krishna speaking the Gita is how does a person attain Krishna? So, it is like an antithesis. That's not true. Not all paths lead to Krishna. There are some paths that lead towards Krishna. There are some paths that will indirectly lead towards Krishna. And there are certain paths that go away from Krishna. That is the path to hell. Path to hell is when you are too sinful. That will lead you to hell. So, so we have to be careful who we are following and what philosophy we are, where we are finding inspiration. So here, actually, I was talking about that this is the Grahastha section of the Gita. So many, I don't know if you have heard, there is in ISKCON at least, there are sometimes there are debates between Grahasthas and the Brahmacharis. So there is this eternal debate: who is better? Grahasthas are better or Brahmacharis are better? So when there is a debate, of course, this debate happens at a philosophical level. So everybody speaks, they quote different verses, and the brahmacharis. So this happens in a closed group. It's not something that it happens. You will not find these kind of videos on YouTube, and it's very hard to get. So it happens in a closed group, and I was fortunate to be part of one of the such debate. So there were senior brahmacharis and senior grahasthas who are very strong in philosophy, and then generally it would happen in the presence of some spiritual leader, some sannyasi leader who is well versed in the in the scriptures. So, and the idea is not to conclude who is better, grahasthas are better or brahmacharis are better. The idea is to really, this is like an exercise also for them. It's for preaching. Sometimes then you preach to people, and sometimes there are debates also. So it is like a preaching exercise for them. So this debate this one of the debate that I was fortunately part of. So the topic was, who are better? Are grahasthas better, or as the brahmacharis are better? So the brahmacharis, they quoted, any guesses which section of the Gita they quoted? We just finished it. It's the second chapter, the last section, where Krishna and Arjuna asked this question: what are the symptoms of what is it word that Sthitapragya Saka Bhasha? Now, what is the symptom of a person who has full control on his senses? So that section. So Krishna speaks elaborately when Arjuna asked that question. So about sense control. So brahmacharis would quote those verses, and then the grahasthas, that it comes to them, they would quote this section, karmendriyani samyama, this one and the next verse. So one who restrains the sense of act but whose mind dwells on sense objects certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender. So that's how it is. So definitely it is. So what do you all think? Who are better? Just just unofficially, obviously I'm not going to quote anyone.
Neither.
Okay. Why? Neither are good.
No,
Both
neither
are bad.
are
Both
better
are
than
bad.
the other. No, neither are better than the other. I mean, one of the greatest acharyas, Bhakti Vinod Thakur was a grahastha,
Yeah.
and Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati was a Naistika brahmachari. So some of our greatest acharyas are both grahasthas and brahmacharis. So neither is, you can say one is better than the other. It
Okay.
depends. It depends on your Krishna consciousness in
Very
either
true.
stage of life. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other opinions? Who is better, brahmacharis or grahasthas?
I mean, technically, you can argue like you did, but
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Looks like there are no other opinions. So yeah. But you're right, Mataji. The example that you gave, actually, if you look at Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's associates themselves, mostly all the associates were grahasthas. So and then even if you look at Mahabharat setting, Krishna himself was a grahastha, and all these Pandavas were grahasthas. So we don't see so much. Obviously, Mahabharat has a different setting, different context, different purpose. So, but you are right that it is not that one is better than the other. So the example that was given by Maharaj, I don't remember who it was, Bhakti Vikas Maharaj or some other Maharaj. So he gives the example of the army. So in the defense we have three different wings. We have the army, we have the navy, and we have the air force. So he said, how do you decide which is better? Is army better? Is air force better? Or is navy better? Everything has its own utility, and everything is important in its own content. All three are required. You can't say that, okay, if I have the strongest air force, then I don't need army and navy. And similarly, if I have the strongest navy, I don't need air force and army. No, all three are required. When there is a war, all three are required for defense. Similarly, we are at war with Maya. So there is an internal war that is happening. So internally also we have agents of Maya. Which are the agents of Maya internally? Krishna describes it in the Gita. What are the sitting places of lust? The sitting place of lust Krishna describes later in the Gita. It is the mind, intelligence, and the senses. So all the strategic locations are already conquered by Maya. So these are the internal agents. And externally, obviously, we see there's so much advertising that Maya is doing. So it is like a war with Maya. So all three are necessary actually. So which are the three sections that we have? Three wings. We have the Grahasthas, we have the Brahmacharis, and then we have the Sannyasis also. So all three are required actually, and all three do their own purpose. You know, the Grahasthas, you can say it is like the army. You know, everywhere they even the temples are maintained mostly by the Grahasthas. You know, in Pune, I remember the all the at least the Grahastha counselors and all the the senior devotees, they would automatically give 10% of their salary to the local temple, to maintain that temple, because there's so many brahmacharis living in Pune temple. When I was there were 300 brahmacharis who were living. So there are so much expenses, and then there are all these feasts are there, and so much big temple properties, so you need many to operate that. So they would automatically give 10% of some would give more also. And similarly the brahmacharis are there who are doing all the activities which are needed, and I think we should also follow that model. And if Pyari Prabhu is there, I just want to him to hear that I tried from my side to raise some funds. Okay, so uh, the brahmacharis also, if you see, their life is not easy actually. They are working so hard, and I would think brahmacharis work harder than the grahasthas. The brahmacharis, they have to actually get up early in the morning. They have to attend Mangal Aarti. They have to attend all the programs. They cannot skip the classes. They have to attend the morning class. They have to attend the afternoon Aarti, then Sandhya Aarti, and everything. All the programs they have to attend mandatorily, unless there is a good reason for not doing it. And of course, there are brahmacharis who have some service in the kitchen, who would have some other cleaning services. So when they're busy in their services, then that's definitely a thing. But then they would run around so much, and at the same time they have to do preaching, they have to complete their own sadhana. So many things are there. There is this book written by Bhakti Vikas Maharaj. Bhakti Vikas Maharaj wrote a book, Brahmacharya in Krishna Consciousness. So there he describes, and one line is very catching. He says, for brahmacharis, there is no privacy, no place to live, very little place to live. Actually, in one room, there would be so many brahmacharis staying. So there will be no privacy also, and very little place to live actually. And he says, long hours of hard work, very little sleep. And then he concludes with, but pure ecstasy, pure ecstasy, because they are doing everything for Krishna. So they're always ecstatic, and they're so energetic. Recently when I was in India, when I was in Pune temple, all the brahmacharis that I met, they were so, enthusiastic in whatever service they were doing. So they inspire people also to do so much service. So actually all three are needed, and sannyasis also, they have a special place. They have their own purpose. They also do so much service, and what they do is something that is irreplaceable. You can't replace that actually. So all three are needed. So we can't say that one is better than the other. Obviously there are different levels for different people, and depending on our level, we can decide what could be our place, whether you want to be brahmacharis, or obviously once you become a grahastha, then there is no going back to become a brahmachari. You have your own family responsibilities. But until you are not married, then you also have an option to take a even brahmacharis, they can also later on become grahasthas if they like, but at least for few so many years, they have to follow the brahmacharya standards. So now, because we are discussing this, I just want to bring one more point. So there is this question that was asked by one of the persons, and it became quite controversial. This question was asked, it was published in BTG also, in one of the Back to God magazines. So this question was that, Krishna doesn't recommend sannyas. He recommends Arjuna to fight. He doesn't recommend to give up activity. Then why are so many people in ISKCON, they become brahmachari? So anyone has any idea how to answer that? That is true actually, right? Krishna doesn't recommend Arjuna to become a sannyasi or whatever. He says that you fight. Very clear, unequivocal instruction about fighting. So how do we justify so many people becoming brahmacharis? Anyone has any idea?
What do you mean becoming brahmacharis? You mean staying as brahmacharis?
Yeah, basically, when these devotees they become brahmacharis, most of them they don't take sannyas and then they continue like that, and then ultimately. So we know that in Vedic philosophy, grahastha ashram is optional; it's not mandatory. So
Right.
from brahmachari, you can directly become,
Sannyasi, right.
sannyasi. And there are so many examples in the history. So the question is, question that this person asks is, Krishna recommends activity, then why do so many? So we say that we follow Krishna's instruction in the Bhagavad Gita, we follow
Mm-hmm.
Bhagavad Gita, and Krishna is saying to Arjuna that you don't renounce the world. So in one sense, becoming brahmachari means renouncing, right? Renouncing the active life, active material life. So how do we justify that? Because according to this person, we are not following the spirit of the Gita.
Well,
All these,
they're still serving. They're serving only Guru and Krishna. They're not, and and they're still serving society at large, but they're not serving one, family unit. And if they can control their senses, that is, that is their inclination.
yeah, sure.
And unlike some other religious way, like in Christianity and all that, we can become sannyasis even from the grahastha ashrama, right?
Right, that's true.
So you don't have to stay a brahmachari to become a sannyasi.
Yeah.
In some religious traditions, they have to be celibate all their life to kind of become a type of monk. But
Yeah,
for us,
different. Yeah, go ahead, Mataji.
from both stages, they can become sannyasi.
Yeah.
At some point.
So definitely there are multiple answers to this. There's no one answer, and different Maharajas have also tried to give different answers. And this question has been asked many times. This is not just, but this time it was published in BTJ. I've never seen any such things getting published and then you are getting an official answer. So different people have explained this differently, and all these answers are valid answers. Obviously, there is no one right answer to this. But the thing is, if you look at the context of the Gita, Arjuna is already a grahastha. So it is not that. So what Arjuna is asking is that, I'll give up my active life and then I take sannyas. And the motivation for that sannyas was not a higher purpose over there. It's not that Arjuna wanted to do some service for Krishna and that's why he wanted to take sannyas. He was scared. He was fearful of the war. He didn't want to kill people so much. So his motivation was not a higher purpose. He was using sannyas ashram as a hiding place more, if you can look at it that way. And that is what actually Krishna condemns. That is not that is something that should not be done in the Gita. That's how Krishna puts it. Now Krishna himself says in the Gita, Sardharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. Give up all varieties of religion, all variety of dharma, and just surrender unto me. Aham tvam sarvabhayo mukshashyami mashucha. So the idea there is to not give up dharma and become sinful. The idea there is to give up aparadharma and take up paradharma. So paradharma is devotional service, our devotion to Krishna, our duty towards Krishna, and aparadharma are our material duties. So Arjuna was concerned that, if I kill so many people, I'll become sinful. I'll incur sinful results. I'll incur sin. And that's where Krishna had said, you just give up all varieties of dharma and surrender into me. So that is the conclusion of the Gita, surrendering to Krishna. Now, obviously, when we live in this material world, then we have to also live at the apara level. There is also a practical level. So the idea is that we take up that dharma which is more anukul to our bhakti to Krishna. So anukulasya sankalpam pratikulasya varjanam. So we take up that is anukul, that is conducive to our bhakti, and we give up that is pratikul. Pratikul is which is counterproductive. So for some people, obviously grahastha, the brahmachari level becomes more conducive. Prabhupada also said this many times. Obviously, Prabhupada, we have to see what Prabhupada said in the context of what he said. He was not saying that the grahasthas are lower than the brahmacharis, but he did say that, if you are a brahmachari, then you are already 50% done. So obviously that other 50% has to be there. So definitely brahmacharya is more conducive, where you are directly involved in devotional things. You're directly worshipping, serving Krishna. You're directly involved in so many preaching activities. But that doesn't mean that grahasthas can't do this. They can also do this. They can also directly get engaged, at the same time take care of their family, at the same time they can also take care of their spiritual life. So at the level of bhakti,
just one more point, grahasthas also support all the other ashramas,
exactly,
right?
yeah. So
Yeah.
they're also needed, very much needed. So it's not that you can live without grahasthas. So obviously when even Prabhupada was there, most of the devotees used to live in the temple. But then at that time, there was so much external support that they were getting from different donors, in different ways they were getting money by distributing books. So the bhakti, it's not that one is greater than the other. All are bhaktas only, all are devotees. So one is serving in one way and the other one is serving in some other way. So, but this verse that we are discussing here, that applies more to, not to us as such, not to brahmacharis. It applies to pretender renunciate, one who pretends to be a renunciate. That, okay, I am such a great person, I have renounced the world. But internally he is contemplating on sense objects. He's also secretly and confidentially he is trying to, act upon it. So such a person is called a pretender renunciate. Now, Krishna actually gives a full chapter on Jnana Yoga in the Uddhav Gita. Here he doesn't talk so much about Jnana Yoga. Even there is so we do have the Jnana Yoga section in the Gita where he gives Jnana, but how does a Jnana Yogi live? How does how should he live? What is his life? What things he should do or he should not do? That is not discussed so much in the Gita, because Arjuna is living in the Vedic context and he understands how it is done. So the idea is Krishna wants to tell Arjuna which is better and which is better for Arjuna. So he doesn't give so much details of how it is to be practiced. That is understood that Arjuna knows that. So, but Krishna gives a very clear instruction about Jnana Yogis in the Uddhav Gita. So there he details how a Jnana Yogi should live. It's very difficult actually if you look at it. They are even, it is mentioned that the leaves that fall on their own, they're only supposed to eat that. They should not even do the endeavor to go and pluck the fruits and pluck the leaves. So it's so strict. It is, and to a large extent it is impractical also. So I don't think most people in this age would be able to follow that. And same is the case with Dhyana Yoga. Dhyana Yoga, it says Arjuna also rejects Dhyana Yoga. He says, I cannot do this. I can control the wind, but I cannot control my mind. And still Krishna says that no, it is possible by renunciation and by practice. And then Arjuna still is not convinced. He asks the question, what happens to a person who tries to do this but he fails? Because he was not confident that I can do this. So, and then obviously Krishna gives a fantastic reply to that. And then later Krishna starts talking about Bhakti Yoga, which is more practical, and Arjuna is convinced with that. Tasyaham sulabha partha nitya yuktasya yoginam. There he says, and this is easy. For the first time in the 8th chapter, 8.14, I believe Krishna says, I can be easily obtained by Bhakti Yoga. So let me take a quick pause here and see if there are any questions or comments or corrections about what I said.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
You can be in the samsara, you can be married, but you can still become sannyas by practicing the religious things and be close to Krishna, because that's what everybody said, like all the religious persons said, that you can be in your family, you can be married and you are practicing religious things towards Krishna. That you can do. You have to think of yourself as a servant of God.
Yeah, very true, Mataji. Prabhupada also talks about this in the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, in the instructions of Kapil Dev. And Kapil Dev is instructing to his sons. He had 100 sons, and he is telling them to practice brahmacharya. And I was surprised. I was thinking that, he himself has 100 sons. Obviously, he was not a renunciate or a brahmachari. And why is he
Yes.
telling his
Yes.
sons to become brahmachari? And there in the purport, Prabhupada makes it very clear. When I first studied, I was so confused that, how could he tell his sons to become brahmachari? But then
You have
Prabhupada,
to.
yeah,
You
Prabhupada
have to be
elaborates
there,
that.
like the servant of God. That's how you serve God.
Very true, Mataji.
Even though you are in the in a family, you lead a family life.
Yeah, very true, Mataji. So Prabhupada actually details it out there. I think it's I don't exactly remember in which chapter of the 5th canto, but that is in the 5th canto, if I'm not wrong. The Kapil Dev's instruction to his sons. Prabhupada basically tells in detail how to practice sannyas within
Yes,
grahastha life.
Grihastha life. That's what it is.
Okay, any other questions, comments, corrections?
Thank you for a very nice lesson.
Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
I had heard an old Tamal Krishna Maharaj lecture, and he says that getting into Grihastha Ashrama is like getting into a well for a number of years, where you are,
Yeah.
there are so many responsibilities once you get into it, you have to fulfill your responsibilities towards your children, your wife, and everything. So you are kind of stuck there for a while.
Yeah, definitely, I would agree. But even to practice it's not easy to be a brahmachari and a sannyasi also. That's also, we may think that, they
It's
don't have any
not, yes.
responsibilities. They
In
don't
fact,
have.
I heard in
So,
another lecture, people think like sannyasis, they get all this attention, all this
Yeah.
garlands and nice prasadam and everything. But really, a sannyasi has no one to kind of, in a sense, no one feels responsible for that person, they have to accept whatever people give them, wherever they go, they cannot specifically ask for something.
Right.
Whereas in a family life, husband can ask a wife, "Oh, I like this. Can you cook this for me?" And there is somebody to kind of watching over you when you're sick. There is someone specifically responsible for you. In family life. Whereas a sannyasi has to be very, very dependent on Krishna. And the brahmachari also, they have to just accept whatever is provided to them.
Very true, Mataji. Only they know what are the challenges for them. We know our
Right.
challenges. And
So
we
every
can tell,
ashram has
okay,
its own challenges. Yes.
yeah, the grass on the other side is always greener,
Always
but,
greener.
but there
Yes.
is no green grass.
There is no green grass. My
So,
grandmother used to say, it's one is a red ball of sand and a green ball of sand, but both are balls of sand.
yeah.
The taste is the same. One is a different. The difference is in like a color. One is one color, and other is another color, but they both are. It's difficult to swallow.
Yeah, and what I could see in Prabhupada's instructions, and when obviously he won't talk about these things in his purport and other things so much, but when people would practically go to him for guidance and all, 2 or 3 places where it is available on Vedabase and other Vanipedia and others, he would tell them that, okay, if you, it's better to be a grahastha, but if you're too much disturbed by material desires or your senses are troubling you too much, then you can become a grahastha. So, and obviously, so samyamya word we have to understand. Sanyam is basically controlling the senses. So Sanyam and Niyam, they are two different things. Sanyam is basically completely controlling the senses and keep them in your control. Niyam is regulating the senses. Regulation is obviously there is. So we have the regulative principles, that those are niyams. So we try to regulate the senses around those principles. But even there has to be some amount of sayam is required over there also. You can't say that there is no sayam required when there is niyam. So regulation, it also requires some kind of restraint, but it's not that troubling, at least when there are regulation. So the idea is that gradually you become purified, and then by regulating, then you can come to the level of samyam, where you completely control the senses then. So obviously for people, it is not something that can happen within a day or a year, or even in 10 years. So basically we have the highest principles, and we have the acceptable principles. So we have to be within that. We should not go outside of that. At least we should not go to the bottom, or outside the bottommost principles. So there are acceptable standards, and there's the ideal. So we have to be somewhere in between. So yeah, but I agree with what you said about Tamal Krishna Maharaj. Tamal Krishna Maharaj teachings are wonderful. Some of his lectures are really amazing. I think he did a PhD on Prabhupada, right? If I'm not wrong, either on Prabhupada himself or Prabhupada's books.
I think he was doing it when he left his body. Yeah.
Yeah, and there only
but
yeah.
Prabhupada said at one time that Tamal Krishna Maharaj was one of the most intelligent,
Yeah.
uh,
He only talks
among
about
his disciples. Yeah.
I believe he only talks about it in one of the previous sessions. I was talking about the word that comes repeatedly, Supreme Personality of Godhead. So I think he only mentioned it, that in his analysis of Prabhupada books, he noticed that this word
What did he mention?
That this word comes the most number of times, Supreme Personality of God.
Oh, the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Even in directly in the translations of the Gita, at many places we see directly Prabhupada writes Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is a term that was coined by Srila Prabhupada.
He also, one of his, most analytical lectures that I kind of pass along a lot is he compares the difference between demigods and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He analyzes it so well as to why Krishna
Prabhuji,
is
did
superior.
Prabhupada coin the Supreme Personality of Godhead? I thought it was Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur.
No, I
He
think it
mentions
was
that too.
Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had a different phrase. I'm trying to remember that myself. It was not exactly Supreme. Maybe you're right, Mataji. Yeah.
I think it was Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, but Prabhupada made it more popular. Yeah, made it popular.
That's true.
But I was thinking Prabhupada, of course, coined it in English. But I mean, Sudevi Priya should know this too. And anybody who knows Kannada, I mentioned to you guys one time that Purandar Dasa mentions Devara Deva Shikamani. Devara Deva Shikamani means, the Lord Shikamani, Supreme Personality of Godhead,
Yeah.
It means the same thing, really.
Maybe Prabhupada took it from him.
No, he did not. But I was like, in fact, when I first came into Krishna consciousness, I was amazed to find similar, the Kannada words that Purandar Dasa used were so similar to the words that Srila Prabhupada used, So I felt like, oh, this Dasa philosophy is the same, this Vaishnava philosophy is the same that Prabhupada is preaching. Of course, I didn't know Prabhupada as well. I knew Purandar Dasa better. So it was easier for me to accept Srila Prabhupada's philosophy as non-different from what other Vaishnavas were preaching,
No, Purandar Das is considered to be an avatar of Narada Muni.
Narada Muni, yes. And he comes from the same tradition. I think Madhvacharya, Vyasatirtha all come from that same tradition.
Yeah. Vyasatirtha definitely comes in
Madhva
Sampradaya. So he was a disciple of Vyasatirtha?
He was a disciple of Vyasatirtha, yes.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. So, but it looks like he was very poetic.
He was poetic. In fact, all of his kritis, all of his songs are his guru referred to it as Purandar Upanishad. He named it Purandar Upanishad because really, if you look at all his songs, all of Vaishnava philosophy is within his songs, very simply put in a common man's language.
That's good to know. My understanding of Malwa Sampradaya is that their teachings are very hard hitting. It's not very, it's poetic, but in a way that it hits you hard. It's not very sweet as such.
Yeah, the only difference I found is they concentrate more on Krishna and not so much on the Radha Krishna. You know what I'm saying? That's a slight difference I find. It's not that they don't refer to Radha at all, but they don't refer to Radha as personally as we refer to Radharani, most of the time he refers to her as Shri or Shiri. Shiri means like, the goddess of, fortune. But I don't hear so much the word Radha itself directly. And
we
even
also, even if we call out Radharani's name, we have two honorific titles that we put before and after, Shrimati and Rani, Shrimati Radharani. So we don't just say, so we take it with very awe and reverence.
Right. And in Udupi, which is the seat of Vyasatirtha and Madhvacharya and all that, they really worship Lord Krishna only, right? I mean, there is no Radha's deity there.
Right. Any last comments?
Radharani, the whole concept of Radharani was from Madhavendra Puri's time, and then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the one who fully revealed it. Before it was not revealed. In fact, one of the purposes of Mahaprabhu's advent is to show the superiority of the gopis and the Radharani. That was fully discussed only by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and only he could do it because he was the Lord himself. All of the acharyas, didn't do that. And from Madhavendra Puri's time, that whole concept of Radharani and the gopis was introduced. Before that, it was not even there.
Is it true? Because I thought it's there in Adi Puran and Brahma Vaivarat Puran. And also,
I don't know, but because
also
it says, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. And also we have this Gita Govinda. Gita Govinda was written before Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to relish Gita Govinda where.
But wasn't Madhavendra Puri dated from what's his name? One who wrote Gita Govinda. Jayadev Goswami. Yeah.
Maybe Mataji, I'll have to see the timeline, but he was.
I think Madhavendra Puri is the first one who introduced. That's what I'd read somewhere. I could be wrong. Mm-hmm. And other shastras refer to it, but they refer it in a like Aradhya is something is there. It comes in the Bhagavatam, but Bhagavatam directly Srimati Radharani is not referred to at all. So even in the other shastras, if it is there, it is there in a hidden form. It's not there in an open form.
In Bhagavatam, definitely we know it's in a hidden form. I believe in Brahma Vaivarat Puran, there is this whole description of how Brahma performs a marriage of Radharani and Krishna. Anyway, Mataji, yeah, you could be.
I don't know that. I have not read that.
Okay. All right. I think we are past the time now. We can end here. Thank you so much. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam
pavanebhyo vaishnavabhyo namo namah. Ananta koti Vaishnavavrinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. His Grace Ganapati Govind Maharaj, Ganapati Govind Prabhu ki jai.
Sorry, Maharaj. You're ready to give me sannyas.
Ganapati Govind Maharaj ki jai.